Hi there, and welcome to A Journey to Milk and Honey. Thank you all for joining me today. Before I get started, I wanted to explain something to you very quickly, and that is this. I recorded the chat that you are about to hear a couple of months ago, and as you can imagine, I needed to go back and listen to this for a bit. And I am just so happy that I did, because I believe that you all, just as I am right now, will be so inspired and absolutely blown away by what you're about to hear, which is about just a few of the enormous number of contributions by Israel and the Jewish people to the world. These contributions, again, you're only going to hear a few of them today, are contributions that many of us would never know were created, invented, developed by Israel and the Jewish people. And so many of them are so life-changing to the point that we cannot even imagine life without them today. So hold tight and I'll be right back with my guest, Rabbi Ephraim Shore.
My name is Liz Gabert, and my story begins in the Baptist Bible Belt of West Texas. I married a Catholic man, and together we raised 3 children internationally. Through my travels and experiences, my Jewish faith became secondary to everyday life. Now, after some incredibly powerful events that transpired recently, I'm at a place and time in my life to delve into my Jewish faith. I invite you to join me on this journey where I and an amazing array of weekly guests will enlighten you about the faith, people, and innovations that have shaped Israel and the Jewish people's rich history. Welcome to A Journey to Milk and Honey.
Hey there, just a quick reminder before we get started. If you want to connect with us, we're on all major social media platforms at JMH Podcast. And you can find us on YouTube at JMH Podcast or A Journey to Milk and Honey. You can also find us online at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com or jmhpodcast.com. Oh, and if you enjoy what we do here at A Journey to Milk and Honey, you can help support us by liking, subscribing, or leaving us reviews wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for joining me. All right, so let's get started. I want to introduce you all today to Rabbi Ephraim Shore. Rabbi Shore worked with Aish HaTorah in Jerusalem, Miami, Toronto, and New York for over 40 years. He helped found and run Hasbara Fellowships and HonestReporting. Rabbi Shore now lives with his family in Jerusalem, where he is a sought-after licensed tour guide. And it would be remiss of me not to tell y'all that Rabbi Ephraim Shore is the twin brother of Rabbi Raphael Shore, who I had the honor of speaking to as well just a few episodes back. And I have to highly suggest that y'all catch that episode as well. With that said, I want to welcome Rabbi Ephraim Shore to the show. Welcome, Ephraim, or are we going to go Rabbi Shore?
I'd prefer Ephraim, thanks.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. It's just an honor to meet you.
A pleasure, Liz. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I've already introduced you. I've done a formal introduction before you and I jump on here. But one thing that I didn't introduce in the formal introduction is that you also have a tour guide business in Israel. Is that correct?
Almost.
Almost?
I am a tour guide. I don't run a whole business. I am a tour guide. So when people come to visit, I am the guy who shows them around and shares the history and tells all the stories and gives them ideas of where to go and what to see and what's amazing. So that's my new career. I was a rabbi working in Jewish education for many years, but a few years ago, I switched directions and decided that what could be more fun than introducing people to the beauties and wonders and miracles of this amazing country of Israel. And so it's just a blast. It's a blast, except when there's no tourism like now. Like there hasn't really been any tourists for a year. Yeah. But when there are tourists, then it's just a really fun, wonderful job to be involved in.
Oh, I'll bet it is. How wonderful. So your rabbi business is defunct?
Yeah, pretty much defunct. Once a rabbi, always a rabbi, but I'm not working in a rabbinic position anymore.
Okay, I understand. All right. But do you still work with Aish?
No, I was with Aish for about 40 years in Miami, Los Angeles, New York, Toronto, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I left, and that's when I decided to be a tour guide.
Okay. Yeah, because what is interesting and how I came across you and nabbed you was that some couple of months after October 7th, I was just digging into everything. And folks know what an impact October 7th had on me and millions of people, I think, in different ways. And so I jumped onto Aish just by almost accident. And I'm looking at some of the information, and the articles are there. And your article entitled How the Jews Changed the World about knocked me over. And I reached out through Aish and blah, blah, blah. And here you are. And
There you go. Yeah, it's really nice to meet you after all this time. And I'm glad I was a small part of your journey.
Absolutely. So before we get started, as I told you pre-recording, there is also a video I more recently, like in the last couple of days, came across that you created that talks about, I don't know what it's entitled, the video, right?
Yeah, it's Israel Against the Odds. And
Right.
it talks about how Israel's short history just does not make any sense, that we just keep on breaking records and doing impossible things that have never been done by any other nation. And whether it's that we have more Nobel Prize winners than any other country per capita, that we have more startup companies listed on NASDAQ than any other country per capita, that we get condemned more by the UN than any other country, including all the evil regimes of the world, that we have returned after 2,000 years of forced exile. That's never been done before, to return to your own indigenous homeland after 2,000 years. These things don't happen. So yeah, that's what that film talks about in a very short way.
And the film is about 3+ minutes long, not very long. We're going to play it really quickly because it is amazing. So we're going to do that just real quick, and then we're going to come back. Okay?
Terrific.
Israel is the 100th smallest country on the globe and has about 1/1000th of the world's population. It's only 70 years old, smaller than New Jersey, surrounded by enemies, under constant threat of survival, and possesses few natural resources. And yet, Israel is the only country in history to have revived an unspoken language. Since its founding, Israel has won the second highest number of Nobel Prizes per capita. Although the Jewish people are only 0.2% of the world population, Jews have received 22% of Nobel Prizes, constituting an inexplicable 11,250% above the statistical probability. Israel is the only country that entered the 21st century with a net gain in its number of trees. Even more remarkable, in an area that's mainly desert. Over 90% of Israeli homes use solar energy for hot water, the highest percentage of any country. Israeli companies are building the largest solar energy production facility in the world. Israel operates the world's largest desalination plant and is the #1 country providing usable water from seawater. Israel's scientific research institutions are ranked 3rd in the world and are ranked 2 in space sciences. Israel leads the world in medical patents and has revolutionized modern medicine. Oramed is changing the diabetes therapeutic paradigm by delivering insulin in a pill. Rewalk's exoskeleton allows paraplegics to walk. Orcam allows blind people to virtually see. Israel has more patents registered in the US than Russia, India, and China combined, who have 300 times Israel's population. Israel's innovations have improved the way we work, print, drive, read, eat, drink, talk, exercise, and even play. Israel is the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, and its 3rd largest party is often the Arab Party. Israel has provided humanitarian aid and rescue services to over 140 countries, even to some that refuse to recognize it, like Syria and Lebanon. Israel is the 3rd most educated country in the world, according to the OECD. Israel has the world's 2nd highest number of new books per capita. Israel has the 3rd highest rate of entrepreneurship among women in the world. And in 1969, Israel elected Golda Meir, the 2nd female head of state in modern history. In proportion to its population, Israel has the largest number of high-tech startup companies in the world. In absolute numbers, Israel has more startups than any other country except the US and China. Israel is the only country whose indigenous population returned to its native land after 2,000 years of forced exile. There are 26 official Muslim states in the world and 18 official Christian states, but there is only one Jewish state. Israel, a small place making a big difference.
All right, we're back.
Hi.
So again, that video is fabulous, just fabulous. So inspiring and mind-blowing if you really listen to those stats, to the information. It is stunningly mind-blowing, in my opinion.
It is mind-blowing. Yeah, that's why I wanted to put it together, because each one of those facts that are presented in the movie in itself is pretty remarkable, amazing. But every country is going to have one or two amazing, phenomenal, unusual statistics. But when you put it all together like that, and also many of them are contradictory, it just doesn't make sense that a country that's like busy absorbing more immigrants than any other country in the world is at the same time prospering so dramatically. Usually that would just drain the economy and you can't make any progress. That's what makes it really interesting when you put it all together, because it becomes all the more mind-boggling and impossible. It's impossible and yet it's true. And so it's cool that it's all just put together in front of us.
It really is. And so the country is now only 70, what years old now?
48, 76, I believe. Yeah, 76.
Something like that. We're having a heck of a time with our math, aren't we? But yeah, very young country is the point, right?
Yeah, and tiny nation, tiny land, smaller than New Jersey, as you heard.
Just mind-blowing. So thank you for that. And I hope folks really appreciate what they heard there, because it's really something. So to move ahead, there are tangible contributions that Israel / the Jewish people have made to the world. I didn't know about the teddy bear, but one of the big ones, and something called a pill cam.
Right.
Yes. And so a pill cam in 2001, given imaging, enables the visualization and detection of disorders in the gastrointestinal tract. And when we were in Singapore, I got to share this. You can imagine, you eat stuff and you drink stuff and you travel, and sometimes you get messed up. So I got messed up, and
don't eat at those street places.
No, it wasn't in Singapore. It was Vietnam. I can tell you, we traveled a lot. But bottom line is, this gastrointestinal doctor gave me a pill cam.
Oh, wow.
Was the weirdest thing. So, and now I'm looking at this huge list of Israeli / Jewish contributions to the world, and the pill cam is there. So is there something in your mind that stands out as a tangible contribution by Israel or the Jewish people?
I'll give you one, which is drip irrigation. Drip irrigation did not exist until Israel is like largely desert. About half the country is desert, and we were very dependent on rain. And so it can be a real serious problem, and the same issue in much of the world. And yet no one in the world came up with the idea of creating these special, basically high-tech pipes, actually drip to the exact spot that the plant or tree needs. And it saves something like 60% or 80% of the water that is used to irrigate a field, because it doesn't all get lost in the wrong places in the soil. It doesn't get evaporated as it's sprinkled across a field irregularly. And now they also have companies that have figured out how to track also exactly how many nutrients go into that water. So is it getting its right vitamins and minerals? And the computers will alert you it needs a little bit more magnesium, whatever the plant needs in terms of fertilization. So that revolutionized the world. Like everyone in the world uses now drip irrigation. First, Israel really helped Africa get it. And that changed the world of Africa. They were able to produce much more with limited amounts of water. And all that came out of some kibbutz in Israel that was looking for a creative solution to our water problems. And then you've got more standard things that everybody uses, but not everyone knows it's Israeli. Like just one thing off my top of my head is Waze. Has really changed everybody's life for the better, not in a dramatic way. It's not saving lives, but it's really cool that we can save so much time and energy getting where we need to. And that again, is an Israeli company. Mobileye does save lives. That's an Israeli technology company that basically every car today is now installed with these messaging systems that they know if you're crossing a line, if you're getting close to another car, if you're getting close to something, you get notified. So that has probably saved countless lives. And that's also an Israeli invention. So the list goes on forever.
It absolutely does. Electric car. So in 2012, some company called Better Place, CEO Shai Agassi, developed infrastructure for electric cars. This is back in 2012 as an alternative to fossil fuel technology. It goes on and on.
Yeah, that was really the first major venture into electric cars.
Yes.
And changed the industry that way.
Yeah, it's a huge, I've got an article here and I'll pop it up on the website, but there's so much out there. Folks can find a lot of it. And moving ahead, they can also find on Aish.com the article that you wrote that connected us, which is entitled How the Jews Changed the World. And this is a little bit different, in my opinion, because it's contributions that are about values and morals. And for me, this just hit me deeply, which is a little bit different than all the others, all the tangible contributions. And this is where I would love for you to go, is to talk about this article. I didn't even know, because y'all I don't think you have dates on there, is a few years back, correct?
A few years back, yeah.
Yeah. And that's okay, because it's still relevant.
Yeah, these are more eternal contributions. What I want to do first is just point out that these contributions, when you hear them, they often sound, okay, that's obvious. Have a Sabbath day, or monotheism, or peace on earth. But when we hear these ideas as modern Western human beings growing up in the Western world, we think, oh, this is obvious. So that we don't really appreciate what a great contribution that is. So it's very important for us to first step back and say, what was the world like before the Jewish people came along with these ideas and revolutionized the world with them? And we think they're just like intuitively obvious to every human being. So let me illustrate. I was in Mexico a few years ago, and I asked people, what's a good place to go in Mexico? And they suggested the number one tourist thing in Mexico City, I believe, was the Anthropological Museum. So I go there, and the whole museum, like the history of Mexico, it's just idol worship after idol worship after idol worship, and each one associated with human sacrifice. So the whole thing, like Aztec, Inca, it's just human sacrifice. So I said, like, when did these things stop? So it only stopped 500 years ago, and it only stopped because Christians from Spain conquered the area and taught the natives that you're not supposed to kill other human beings just because you think that there's a God who's going to like their blood, and their blood or their death is going to give you energy. So we think this is intuitively obvious. No, it is not. All of these issues, all of these concepts are not intuitively obvious until somebody comes along and introduces it to you. So we wouldn't have gotten it. Someone had to be the sort of genius who came up with these concepts and introduced it and revolutionized the world, every single one of them. I'll take an example. The Sabbath day. We take the idea of a weekend for granted, right? Of course, we have a weekend, and there's different days of the week. There's the work days, and there's the relaxing days. Not intuitively obvious. When the Romans first conquered Judea, or Israel, as they called it, when they conquered Israel, one of the things that they mocked the Jews about was that we are a lazy people, because one day a week we took off from working. They thought this was ridiculous. It's counterproductive. The economy is going to lose from it. Like, why would any country do such a crazy thing? But we have been doing it since the earliest time. And eventually the world caught on to that idea that there should be a break, that human beings aren't just for producing, but we need some sort of spiritual reflection. We need some family time. We need some time off. And you need some different pace of life. It can't all just be, they used to have 5 days of the year were exactly the same. And then the next 365 were also exactly the same. So we introduced to the world the idea that you take a day off, and eventually that became what we commonly know as the weekend.
I love that. I would have never thought about that.
Right. Yeah. Most people don't give the Jews the credit for their weekend, but there you go.
There you are. There you are. Okay. That is just amazing. And is there another one you would love to dig into here?
Yeah, I think another one really a little more obvious, this one, but is universal education. So the Jewish people have been around for 3,800 years. And from our very, very first day, literacy was something that was just taken for granted in the same way that today in North America and many other Western countries, literacy is also taken for granted. So we think this is just also really obvious, but it's not. Because in the United States, for example, it was only in 1918 that every state was required to have children go to school. And until then, lots of children, 6, 7 years old, send them to the coal mines, right? Or whatever is needed. The idea that every child should be literate was a really revolutionary concept. And that's in the United States. Other countries, it took a lot longer. In India, it wasn't until 2009 that they enacted this idea that every child should be literate, should have an education. So the Jewish people, we've understood that life is about learning, about growing. And in order to do that, you need language, you need to express your ideas, you need to pass on your morals, your values, your ideas. You need to build one generation on the back of the previous generation. And that only happens when you're literate. So it was a very standard thing. And it took 3,700 years approximately for the rest of the world to catch on that this is something that, every child deserves an education and everybody should be literate. And of course, there's many parts of the world where they still haven't caught on.
Sure. Very good. Very interesting. That's one I had never thought about. So I appreciate it. So one more, there's 2 more. Okay. Are you ready? Can we do this?
Go for it.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay. The one that is so relevant today, I've got to say, there's 2 of them. Everything is relevant for today, by the way. There's nothing that isn't here. But number 11 is sexism.
Oh, okay.
And and the reason I'm honing in on this one just a tad, and this is a little personal anecdote, is that since October 7th, we talk about, I call it Jew hate, because I didn't really know what this is terrible, but I didn't know what anti-Semitism really was for a very long time. And a friend of mine, after October 7th, made a comment about the fact I had said something along the lines of, I would love for my daughter to marry a Jewish guy, right? And she says to me, why? She says, you know how terrible the Jewish men are to their wives? And I about fell over. I didn't even know what she was talking about.
I thought Jewish men are famous for being good husbands.
I don't know, not in this woman's book.
Okay.
And she thinks she knows a lot and I'm just bringing that up because I look here at your number 11 in this article, and it's a sexism. So I'm going to let you talk about that now.
Okay, great. Look, this is definitely one of the more touchy areas because I don't think it would be honest to say that the Jewish view matches up with the Western secular view of men and women. For example, we do have traditionally, I'm talking now in traditional Judaism is what I'm presenting now. What each individual Jewish person does and different streams within Judaism today, that's a whole different thing. I'm talking about the traditional perspective doesn't match 100% with what today's, secular Western world values are. However,
yes,
for where we were coming from in the world, it was definitely revolutionary and way, way ahead of its time. I'll give you a couple examples. In America and in in the United States and even in England until not too long ago, and I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but you can do the research. It was allowed for husbands to rape their wives that was enshrined in law. Like that was considered a right of the husband for sexual relations, and he could force his wife to do it. And that was protected by law. Now that has changed sometimes just in the last number of decades. But in Judaism, from 3,800 years, a woman was not there to serve her husband. She had her own rights. And that was certainly considered completely forbidden in Jewish law and completely unacceptable in a Jewish society. Another example is women could obviously in Judaism own land and could own whatever they wanted. They were separate entities. They had the right for their own property. It was enshrined in Jewish law. And that also in the Western world is just a very recent thing that women are allowed to own property of their own, separate from their husbands, or if they don't have a husband, whatever. And there's also in Judaism, again, going back 3,500 years ago, leaders of the Jewish people were women. Deborah the prophetess was considered the leader. That's the time of Samson. Like we're going way, way back before King David, and she wasn't alone. And the matriarchs of Judaism, we don't look at just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In our literature, we always are talking about Abraham and Sarah, yes, and Isaac and Rebecca. The women were just as important in terms of their spiritual and moral contribution to the formation of the Jewish people. And the stories about them, it's like mutual stories about both of them, and they're central figures. And you don't see that like in the ancient world. If you look in the Roman Empire, except for very few exceptions, you don't really see women having a very central role in day-to-day life or in leadership. But in Judaism, women have always been seen as equal to men in the eyes of God and in Jewish law. How that's played is a complex thing. That women have just as many rights in a court and are protected by laws, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to go into this, but
absolutely. And the one I was waiting for you is Esther got her own book, the Book of Esther. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I just thought because of my experience, but also in today's world, right? So this is very well articulated.
By the way, one of the interesting things about that, just if I can, where this all comes from is that in Judaism, we look at the origin of mankind, that most people think that Adam was created and then Eve was separated from him.
Yep.
That's not how Judaism understands the story. It's very specifically stated that when God created humankind, he created an androgynous human being that was made of the male and female parts, and then they were separated. So it wasn't like one started and therefore one is more important or one is the leader or in charge of things. No, they were both created at the beginning, and then they were separated as two aspects of one mankind, but with different roles, different qualities, but equal.
Oh my gosh. I had never heard it shared that way, explained that way. Again, I'm a little speechless then because that is so awesome to know. Last and finally, if you're okay with this, another point you make in your article, How the Jews Changed the World, is peace on earth. And I think that is a great way to begin wrapping up our time together. And I'm going to let you go to discuss that.
Sure. Okay. So this is another one that's like also in the Western world, we think this is just obvious. Mother's milk and apple pie, peace on earth. Who would disagree with peace on earth? And the answer is everybody. In the ancient world, the idea of peace on earth was just stupid. Every nation felt that they had a right to conquer as many other nations as they possibly could. Their interest was, if I can get something from my country by conquering another country, go for it. The warrior the warrior was the hero in virtually every society throughout history. Whoever was the strongest fighter, which meant that he goes out there, he kills as many people as he possibly can, conquers other countries, brings them under control, gets all the natural resources for other countries, makes us all richer because our country is the country that counts. And it really doesn't matter if we have to kill, conquer, pillage, destroy in order to get that power. That's how it worked. That was the ancient world. And even until very recently, and in still many countries and societies still operate like that. And then into that, Judaism comes and says, we have to respect other human beings. Every single life has infinite value. And that's another Jewish contribution to the world, that we taught the world that every soul, it has infinite value because it's created in the image of God. And therefore every human being, black, white, yellow, man, woman, child, mentally disabled or old, they all have infinite value to their life. And therefore, the ultimate goal is a world which respects each other, loves each other, and does not start wars for their own selfish purposes. And that was revolutionary. It's still revolutionary to much of the world. If I can be a tad controversial, much of the Islamic world today is into making the whole world Islamic. Certainly in the Islamic fundamentalist world, their goal is to conquer the rest of the world with Islam. And you see how they're treating Israel. Anything that gets can get close to them, they're willing to do just about anything in order to get their message across and to accomplish their goals. That's completely against the idea of peace on earth. And that's why when the UN was established, for example, the UN chose as like its main motto or message and the Isaiah there's an Isaiah square right in front where they display their message, and they have a quote from Isaiah that the wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and young lion will lie together, and they will eventually beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will no longer raise sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. And again, that is something which the world still has to learn from. And we've been teaching it for 3,800 years.
Absolutely. Okay. That is an awesome way to wrap this up. I just encourage people, there's so much more here and certainly online, to take a look at Aish. I think Aish has a lot going for it. In my side, I had never heard of it. I had never heard of the organization.
Yeah. So Aish, I should just say Aish is AISH.com. And it's just a great resource for any question anybody has about Judaism, Israel, Jewish issues, philosophy, study. It's all there. It's really a great resource.
It really is. And for regular folks, I'm a kind of a regular folk who hasn't grown up with this, but had a lot of questions, certainly since October 7th. And I find the information there very palatable, I guess is the way I can understand most everything. And I think it's great. And I'm so happy I went there and found you, by the way. And you have quite a bit of work that you did do there. Of course, you were with them for, you said 40 years, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And to wrap up, my plan is I've never been to Israel. So
to get over here.
I know. My daughter made it. She did it with
Birthright.
Thank you. It dropped out of my brain. Yes, she made it with Birthright when we first came back to the States and needed to figure some things out. She was an older teen. And so she spent 3 months there. 3 months. She continued and spent 3 months. And I lived vicariously through her because she was sending all the pictures and the video. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And life moves on, and now October 7th. And so I am going to get there. Probably spring of next year. I'll hunt you down. And maybe you can help me out and direct me.
We'll be happy and looking forward to you visiting. Israel is a place of miracles, and it's inspiring to be here. And it almost always changes a person's perspective and how we see life, God, history. It's also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When it's not in the middle of a war.
It's when it's not in the middle of a war.
When it's not in the middle of a war. It's a bit rough.
Gotcha. That's right. Ephraim, thank you so much for joining me. This has just been a pleasure talking with you and meeting you.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure too.
All right. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day that you have, which isn't a whole lot there. So appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so I hope that y'all enjoyed my chat with Rabbi Ephraim Shore. And I want to thank him so much again for taking the time to speak with me all the way from Israel. As I mentioned before we started, Ephraim, as he prefers to be called, and I only scratched the surface of the life-changing innovations and contributions that Israel and the Jewish people have made and continue to make to improve the lives of all of humanity. And I have to say, though I use the words mind-blowing a lot these days on this journey, the bit we learned today ranks right up there at the top of my list of mind-blowing learning over the last year. That said, we have included a few source links to articles and, of course, to the video we used for the podcast today. But there is, as you can imagine, a ton more information out there for y'all to dig into as well. So if you want to continue to be shocked and awed by the tremendous contributions of the Jewish people and the state of Israel to humanity and the world, I suggest that you dig in yourself. For me personally, what Ephraim called the eternal contributions by the Jewish people were the most amazing. The fact that we would have no Christianity and no Islam without Abraham and his descendants is in itself incredible. And let's add to that list the concept and the goal by most of humanity today, not all, but most of humanity today, to attain peace on earth. That in itself is rather big, wouldn't you agree? How about the concepts of justice for all, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or the concept of charity, which we, the Jewish people, refer to as tzedakah? All of these eternal contributions and so much more began with the Jewish people almost 4,000 years ago. Just let that sink in for a moment. So now for my 2 cents. As I mentioned already, I had no idea as to the extent of the contributions by the Jewish people and by the very, very small nation of Israel to humanity over the course of our existence for now 3,854 years. So, as a more common sense kind of gal most of the time, though my husband would certainly not totally agree with that, I am baffled by the very pervasive Jew hatred that has not only reared its nasty, hateful, evil head over the last year, but has existed for almost 4,000 years now, as long as the Jewish people have existed. Hatred by not only Islamic radicals, but by hundreds of millions more who are not Islamic radicals. I am baffled by the millions upon millions of people, young, not so young, and old, who have benefited mightily over the last 3,854 years by the life-changing contributions by the Jewish people to this day. It's utterly shocking and disgusting for me that this Jew hatred still exists. The Jew hatred here in America is so much more pervasive than I could have ever imagined, even amongst some of my friends and acquaintances, though they will never admit it, but which has been very obvious to me since October 7th. And if it was even possible that there could be anything more disgusting and sad for me, is the fact that even millions of Jews don't see the Jew hatred for what it is. They claim they do, but they don't, as they continue to support political candidates and organizations that clearly do not support the one Jewish state, and by association, the world's Jewish people. This breaks my heart. I think Ephraim said it best in his article, How the Jews Have Changed the World, as follows. And while the world was busy absorbing Jewish inventions into their culture, they were simultaneously persecuting and not infrequently attempting to destroy us. How strange that one of humanity's most positive contributors has been singled out for more hate than any other. Man, has he got that right. So now I'd like to close on a positive note with a few fun facts that you might not know about Israel and the Jewish people beyond what Ephraim and I shared with y'all today. For example, did you know that Israel is 8,550 square miles big or small, which is about the size of New Jersey. And New Jersey is the 5th smallest state in the U.S. There are 2 official languages in Israel, Hebrew and Arabic. Can you imagine that? Hebrew and Arabic. The total population of Israel is 9.9 million. Of that, 7.7 million, or 78.6%, of the population is Jewish. But did you also know that 2.1 million, or 21.4%, of the population is Muslim? How about that? And how about this? Israel recycles 90% of their wastewater that they create, making it the leading nation in the world for water recycling. The United States, on the other hand, recycles only 1% of our wastewater. Can you even fathom this? How about this one? An Israeli company has developed an atmospheric water generator that can create clean drinking water from air. This has been deployed in disaster situations all over the world. And how about this one? A Tel Aviv company has invented a folding car that can track its wheels for narrow streets and snug spots, but can still reach speeds of 55 miles an hour. I'd love to have that in Singapore, by the way. Did you know that 85% of Israeli households get hot water from rooftop solar heaters, compared to less than 1% in the United States? And here's an interesting one for y'all. An Israeli scientist's invention to turn dog poop into odorless, sterile fertilizer powder instantly is starting to revolutionize how animal and human waste is disposed of. How about that? And finally, here's a stat that I bet y'all didn't know. Since 1958, there have only been 3 years without a Jew winning the Nobel Prize. Isn't that just miraculous? So let me just close out with this. In the words of Thomas Cahill from his book entitled The Gift of the Jews, which, yes, I lifted from Ephraim's article on Aish entitled How the Jews Changed the World, Cahill says the following: "Without the Jews, we would see the world through different eyes, hear with different ears, even feel with different feelings, and we would set a different course for our lives. Their worldview has become so much a part of it that at this point might as well have been written into our cells as a genetic code." Thank you all for joining me today on A Journey to Milk and Honey. Before you go, don't forget that you can stay connected with us on social media, as we're on all major platforms at JMH Podcast, and we would love to hear from you. You can also find us on YouTube at JMH Podcast or A Journey to Milk and Honey. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, as it really helps out our channel. And wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure to follow us there to stay updated on new episodes and to keep your journey going. If you're looking for more, you can visit us online at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com or jmhpodcast.com. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to leave a review or comment, as your feedback helps the podcast to grow and improve, and we truly value your support. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and shalom.